The movie begins with Thomas and Bee's wedding ceremony, attended by villagers and Bee's pet rabbits. During the ceremony, chaos erupts when Peter attacks Thomas upon hearing he'll be their father. However, it's just Peter's imagination, and the ceremony proceeds smoothly. After Thomas and Bee return from their honeymoon, they are in a toy store that also sells books about rabbits, written by Bee. The sales support land conservation in their village. A boy recognizes Peter's gang and calls them mischievous rabbits. He even knows the names of Peter's companions, Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Benjamin. Shortly after, a letter carrier arrives, and Peter and his friends draw lots to see who will take it. However, Peter always wins. When he takes the letter, a London rat named Joni greets him and congratulates him on Bee's book about Peter. Initially acting arrogantly, Peter ends up breaking a window, injuring Thomas. Bee tries to spare Peter's feelings by stopping Thomas from expressing his frustration in front of him. They argue quietly, and Thomas eventually apologizes to Peter. Bee then reads the letter from a publisher named Nigel, offering to publish her book. Hearing this, they become very happy and immediately head home. After parking the car, Thomas and the rabbits rush to their garden to eat. Bee serves food and accidentally drops a sheet of her book, which Peter retrieves. However, Thomas, always seeing Peter as naughty, thinks he wants to damage it. He even remarks that his future child will behave better than Peter. This upsets Peter, who remembers his time with his father. Glancing out the window, he sees a badger named Tommy Brock, about to eat the tomatoes Thomas planted. Peter rushes out, stops Tommy, and retrieves the stolen tomatoes, but Thomas misunderstands and scolds him again. Shortly after, Bee, Thomas, and Peter's gang hop on a train to meet the publisher. During the journey, Cottontail eats too many candies and becomes hyperactive, running around until she faints. When they arrive at the location, they're greeted by Nigel, who sees Peter as the leader. Peter disagrees but always ends up in front. Nigel then instructs his assistant named Carlos to serve water for them, and Nigel discusses the book with Bee and Thomas. Nigel suggests highlighting the rabbit's individuality, with Benjamin the wise one, Cottontail the cheerful one, Flopsy and Mopsy the dynamic ones, and Peter the troublemaker. Thomas and Nigel agree, based on Bee's previous portrayal of Peter in her previous book. However, Bee disagrees, defending Peter. Nigel then shows a billboard depicting Peter as mischievous with an evil face, disappointing him. Shortly after, Peter storms off and meets an old rabbit named Barnabas, who challenges him to mischief. Peter, who happens to be angry, vents it by throwing peaches on the street. The store owner immediately chases them with a broom, but Peter and Barnabas manage to escape by hiding in a mailbox. Barnabas then asks where Peter comes from and about the clothes he's wearing because Peter's clothes are very similar to the clothes of his old friend. Peter reveals that the clothes were a gift from his dad. Barnabas also surprised to see Peter able to wink, as the only rabbit he knows who can wink is his friend who lives in the countryside near the lake, just like where Peter is from. When Barnabas hears Peter's name, he realizes that Peter's father is his old friend. Shortly after, they get caught by two adults. Meanwhile, Bee is signing her contract with Nigel, while the rabbits enjoy their meal without Peter. Peter and Barnabas end up in a pet shop, feeling scared. A girl buys them and takes them home to play with her brother. When the family leaves, Barnabas raids the kitchen for food. He plans to manipulate the humans into taking care of them, even forming a team with Whiskers the mouse, Tom Kitten, and Mitten the cats. They almost get caught, but manage to escape with stolen food. They consider leaving it behind, but Peter suggests teaching the homeowner a lesson. With Peter's plan, they'd escape safely with the stolen food. Barnabas thanks Peter for the idea, as it helped them get plenty of food this time. Shortly after, a pig named Robinson shows up, asking for their food. Barnabas tells Peter to handle it, but Peter feels guilty and refuses. It turns out Robinson is part of Barnabas's gang, teasing Peter. Barnabas takes Peter for a walk and shows him how to steal a potato. Peter enjoys being with Barnabas because nobody calls him naughty. Shortly after, Bee and Thomas arrive, and Peter goes home with them. At home, Peter tells Benjamin about Barnabas, and Peter feels that Barnabas can understand him like a father, unlike Thomas, who always sees Peter as a troublemaker. Peter then invites his siblings to meet Barnabas's gang in Gloucester. They take a train and taxi to Barnabas's hideout. When they arrive there, Barnabas recognizes all of Peter's gang. Afterward, Peter offers his gang's help for Barnabas's next mission. At first, Barnabas is hesitant, thinking it's too risky for them. However, Peter and his gang quickly prove their skills. Meanwhile, Nigel visits Bee and Thomas at the store, showing them a print of the Peter Rabbit book. Bee is thrilled and shares a painting for the next cover. However, Nigel disagrees if the background is just their house page, and he wants Bee to imagine more broadly. On the other hand, Barnabas explains their plan, stealing the Valley Farmers' harvest from the farmers' market, focusing on dried fruits. These are perfect for them, as the dried fruit lasting longer, easy to carry, and inconspicuous. But the market is well guarded. The seller of the dried fruits is a girl named Sarah Nakamoto, who always guards her stall regardless of anything, except for William, the boy selling cheese across the stall who is always watched by Sarah. Their plan involves distracting William to divert Sarah's attention, then hitching a ride with an old man who buys sausages. Barnabas then asks Peter and his friends to rally other animals for the mission, including Pigling Bland, Jemima Puddle Duck, Jeremy Fisher, Tiggy Winkle, Tommy Brock, and also Felix Deer. Shortly after, Cottontail, along with Flopsy and Mopsy, retrieves a flashlight at home. Just as they're about to leave, Thomas approaches Bee, who's painting Peter's gang as per Nigel's request. Thomas questions if this aligns with Bee's wishes, but she brushes it off. The next day, Peter and his friends embark on their mission. Meanwhile, Bee reads her book to children at a library. Nigel provides a car for Bee and Thomas, but Thomas meets Nigel without Bee's knowledge to discuss her. Instead, Nigel invites Thomas to a boxing match, where they talk while boxing. Thomas believes Nigel imposes his ideas on Bee, while Nigel sees Thomas as selfish. Shortly after, Nigel informs Bee that Thomas met him and shared that she didn't like his idea. This leads to an argument between Thomas and Bee, with Bee upset, feeling Thomas is hindering her success. Meanwhile, Barnabas and his crew, along with Peter and his friends, are already at the farmers' market to execute their plan. They start by disabling the selling farmers and making William fall to distract Sarah. Unexpectedly, Thomas is also there to sell tomatoes from his garden. Thomas falls after bumping into William's rolling cheese, briefly locking eyes with Peter before Peter rejoins the dried fruit theft team. When Felix successfully puts the dried fruits into the old man's car, Barnabas and his crew, along with Peter, are already inside the car, leaving Peter's other companions behind. They are taken by the pet shop officers who once kidnapped Peter and Barnabas. Thomas sees this and becomes confused and panicked. On the other hand, Barnabas actually deceived Peter and his friends. They only used Peter to steal and didn't intend to share the stolen goods. Moreover, Barnabas isn't Peter's dad's old friend. These lies began when he felt unwanted due to the influence of Bee's book about Peter. Barnabas realized that he was aging, while people only wanted to adopt young rabbits like the ones in the book. He then tracked down Peter and exploited him. However, Barnabas realized that Peter was smart, so he wanted Peter to join his gang. But Peter refused, jumping out of the car and running to the pet shop that kidnapped his friends. There, he saw Cottontail, Flopsy, and Mopsy have already been taken by buyers. Peter became even more panicked and then met Thomas, and they immediately entered the pet shop, but Peter's companions were no longer there. Thomas quickly gave money to the cashier in exchange for Peter's friends' buyers' addresses. As they journeyed, Thomas was astonished to discover that Peter could communicate like a human. Soon after, their car ran out of gas, forcing them to push it. During the push, Peter apologized for damaging Thomas's tomatoes and recounted his encounter with Barnabas, where he was deceived. Moved by Peter's story, Thomas reassured him and admitted to not being a good father to Peter and the other rabbits. He also confessed his dislike for Peter being labeled the naughty one by Nigel, which led to an argument with Bee. Through these conversations, Peter and Thomas grew closer. Meanwhile, Bee is in a meeting with Nigel and the publishing team, discussing her next project, a movie set in outer space featuring Peter and the rabbits. However, Bee feels the idea doesn't match her pet rabbits' personalities. The team, on the other hand, finds Bee's storyline too dull. Shortly after, Thomas and Peter arrive to see Bee. Seeing this, Bee quickly presents Peter to the team, pretending he's wearing a space helmet by covering his head with a glass. This causes Peter to struggle to breathe, making Bee angry. Thomas then informs Bee about Peter's gang being kidnapped. Nigel suggests Bee should just buy new rabbits, which upsets her deeply, considering Peter and the rabbits her family. This leads to Nigel threatening to halt any project related to Peter Rabbit. However, Bee doesn't care because to her, Peter and the other rabbits are her family. They immediately leave and start the rescue operation. The first rescue is not difficult because the buyer easily hands over Jemima Puddle Duck. The second, they encounters obstacles but successful to brought back Tiggy Winkle. The third rescue is challenging, with the buyer intending to cook rabbit soup using Benjamin and escape on a speedboat. After a chase, they rescue Benjamin. After that, they rescue Jeremy Fisher from a biology experiment. Then Felix Thier, whose head is threatened to be mounted on the wall as a decoration, and Tommy Brock, who is taken to the Alps. Meanwhile, Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail found themselves on a plane, about to be used for testing. Luckily, Thomas saved them by jumping from the plane with parachutes. They then rescued Pigling Bland, who was going to be cooked for Easter. Initially, Pigling Bland's buyer chased them, but Tiki Winkle's thorns thwarted the pursuit, allowing them to regroup safely. However, their mission wasn't done. They decided to retrieve the dried fruit taken by Barnabas's gang. Although Barnabas's group captured them, Peter boldly confronted him, causing a distraction and enabling their defeat. They were then tied to the old man's car, heading to the farmer's market, where Barnabas's gang was caught and taken to the pet shop. Later, Peter and the others returned the dried fruit to Sarah using Thomas's car. Peter sincerely apologized to Benjamin, Cottontail, Flopsy, and Mopsy, recognizing them as his family. They happily journeyed back home. In the end, Bee and Thomas welcomed a daughter, who became a new sibling to Peter and the Rabbits. Bee also wrote a new book titled Peter Rabbit 2: Runaway, and the movie was completed. Moral lesson from the story: if you pretend to be an astronaut, make sure to poke holes for breathing. And never jump into a car with rabbits who don't share their dried fruit. It's likely a wild ride to the pet shop.